Ageism. What is it? Are you more ageist than you think? A recent solo podcast I did on this topic got a lot of attention, and in our own Flipping 50 membership, it's regularly I spot women being ageist in reference to themselves, less to other people, but to themselves. This episode is about helping change the value of you right now, whatever age that is. We'll define ageism and talk about who does it, where it exists, and I hope you look at words like young and old differently after you listen. This episode aims to find ageism dismantled so that, if nothing else, we can identify it when we see it, potentially find ourselves loving now for the rest of our lives. I'm Deborah Atkinson. You're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your biggest struggles, concerns, but most of all, we hope to inspire you. I share what to eat, how to move, and how to change your mindset, sometimes about those first two, so you can have the energy and vitality that you want, need, and deserve in this second and better half. My guest today is an internationally recognized expert on ageism. Ashton Applewhite is the author of This Chair Rocks, a Manifesto Against Ageism. And I highly encourage you and would love to hear from you if you pick up that book or the audio book and let me know what you're thinking, as I promise to read it as well. A co-founder of the Old School Anti-Ageism Clearinghouse, she speaks widely at venues that have included the TED Mainstage and the United Nations, and is at the forefront of the emerging movement to raise awareness of ageism and to dismantle it. I can't wait to dive in. Ashton Applewhite, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure, Deborah.
All right. I know we did this in the green room, but for my listeners, I have to say that I was so distracted after I started examining the whole idea that maybe unintentionally I'm more ageist than I think. I was searching online, and of course you popped up all over the place. And I was like, I need to have her on. Watched your TEDx talk. I think that's the first thing that I did.
TED Talk. No
TED
X.
Talk. You're right. No X. Apologize. And then it was like, I'm in love with your name. So I first want you to tell me about your mother. I mean, she was way ahead of her time. My name's Deborah. I mean, that's just so typical. What happened there?
At least it's not Susan.
Or Karen. I'm so sorry, all the Karens and Susans.
And I have a million beloved friends named Susan, but I don't know anyone under 50 maybe named Susan. It's funny how names fall in and out of favor. And I want to say I got there before Ashton Kutcher. I don't know whether my mother deserves the credit or my father, but my father's brother was named, uncle was named Ashton. So I was named in utero, whether I turned out a boy or a girl.
Loved it. I love it. And I love that I think you're a huge leader, paving the way, maybe saying things that are unpopular that people may not be ready to hear when they first hear them. And I think your name just is the epitome of all that. So,
well, I get no credit for the name part, but thank you.
But you've earned it. All right. All right. So literally, how did this all start? By this, I mean, your expert venture into ageism. I mean, you don't dream of becoming an internationally recognized expert on ageism in high school. I mean, when did this start for you?
Well, I have to say that I have never, ever had a career plan of any sort or any vision of what I wanted to do or be. I couldn't decide what to major in college. After college, I traveled for a year and a half till my money ran out. And then I moved to New York to get a job in publishing because the closest I could come to a career plan was that maybe people would pay me to read. Little did I know how little they would pay me. And I didn't set out to become a writer. I wrote my first serious book in my 40s. And 20 years later, in my mid-50s, I can add, math is not my strong point. 15 years later, I started worrying about getting old. The book was published probably about 20 or 22 years after that. But I realized I was super apprehensive about getting old, that it was going to happen to me. And I started researching longevity because I'm kind of a nerd. I mean, if I had been an academic, I would have been a sociologist probably. And that's how I learn about things is read and write and research. And I learned within a matter of months the facts with which I started out my TED Talk. Probably 10 years later, which is just not that the scary stuff about aging isn't real, and it's important not to poo-poo, our fears, but that they are so out of proportion to reality, and that the fear itself is bad for us in 1,000 ways I'm happy to talk about. And so I got a real bee in my bonnet about, where these messages came from and what purpose they serve.
And then I want to dive into all that. And I want to really, though, first go back to the beginning. So foundationally, I think if we can say, okay, racism, I think everybody knows what that is. If we say ageism, I think there's still some curiosity. Would you define that?
Sure. Yeah. Racist to racism as age is to ageism. It is discrimination and stereotyping on the basis of age, which is sort of the dictionary definition, which is very limited. Both of these things, and I'll add another one to the pile that even fewer people are familiar with, which is ableism, which is discrimination and stereotyping on the basis of disability, of cognitive or physical capacity. And ageism and ableism are deeply related. But, and we are being ageist anytime we make an assumption about someone or a group of people on the basis of how old we think they are. And we experience it anytime someone says, you're too old for that. Or even too young. Ageism cuts both ways, and young people experience a lot of it too.
I really want to jump in here. So let me ask a question. How does this fit into ageism? So I often will get someone asking a question two different ways. So the first one I'll get is, how old are you? Like, they often want to know, because I'm working with women flipping 50. Am I actually 50 myself? And then, though, the comment after is, oh, you look so good, or it's something like we're looking for a frame of reference for what that age should look like, or does it match our frame of reference? Can you speak into that a little?
Sure. I mean, I'll tell you, for a generalist like me, aging is so fascinating. If you had told me 15 years ago that I would be fascinated by aging, I would have said, ew, why do I want to think about something icky and depressing? And it is anything but. It is how we move through life. It's not something sad that old people do, right? We are aging from the minute we're born. It intersects with everything about our personal growth and development, or lack thereof. It intersects with every domain of thought, economics, biology, philosophy, you name it. So, that question that you just asked could go off in 100 different directions. The simple "how old are you" is a complicated question in itself, because we live in a society where age is not neutral. And so I want a world where we both claim our age, and I'm about to be 70 actually, but also in the same breath or the same move, question any fixed notions that people attach to that number. And we all do. The minute you hear a number, unconscious associations with that number instantly pop into your mind and start to frame associations and assumptions about that person. So, and the whole business of being a woman, aging is different for women because we are punished for appearing to age, God forbid, and also for becoming infertile, God forbid. So you are also up against a whole bunch of associations about that. So I would like people to say, how old they are when they are asked, but I would also like them to ask the person, I'll tell you, if you tell me what changes in your mind once you have a number, or tell me why you want to know, because it's not actually that important once we move out of childhood. A year when you're a kid is a huge developmental milestone, but the longer we live, the more different from one another we become. Think about it, every newborn is unique, of course, but 17-year-olds are way more alike developmentally, socially, cognitively than 47-year-olds, and so on out. So the older the person, the less the number says about you.
I love that.
As for you look so good, at least they didn't say the more annoying comment, you look great for your age.
For your age, yes.
Right. And, it's really hard not to be complimented by that. But when we accept that compliment, we are doing a couple of things that are not good for us or the culture. We are accepting the mother of all ageist stereotypes, which is younger equals better. And we can only accept the compliment at the expense of people who don't happen to be lucky enough to look as good as we do. So it's not a good thing for female solidarity. And also, we're not challenging the idea, that this is what my age looks like. How could I look any age but my own, right? So it's really important to, the only snappy answer I've come up with in all this time of thinking about this is you look good for your age too.
I like that.
And then let that uncomfortable, sort of slight tension hang there, because the person means it as a compliment, but it's not a compliment.
Yes.
And we change the culture when we ask others or are ourselves forced to endure that bit of discomfort to think about, wait, gee, this doesn't have the meaning I thought it did, or that I wanted to. What's going on here? What's in that dissonance? And the fact is that, we should, it's really important to look good. It's important to be healthy, but the goals need to be to look good and to be healthy, not to be young or stay young. I don't know if you caught this charming little bit of news just this week, but Kim Kardashian said on a news channel that she would literally eat poop every day if it would keep her younger.
Oh, I'm sorry, but starting any sentence with Kim Kardashian said, no, I just turned out.
So that's how much, it's really, ageism is a form of self-loathing, and it's really manifest in beauty culture. And we see this, we have wonderful examples from the body acceptance movement, right? And people who are fat saying, I'm fat, it's who I am. And people who are disabled saying, my disability is part of who I am. I'm not ashamed of it. It's part of my identity. And of course, age needs to be seen, in the same way. It's just part of who we are. It's real. I think it's important not to lie or conceal your age, but we also need, in the same breath, to push back against the fixed meanings that people attach to that number. And we all do that. No judgment.
The other place that I see or hear it show up a lot in our audiences, in fact, I was on a masterclass last night where I had this question asked in the chat. Is there any exercise that as a 72-year-old that I shouldn't do? And I thought, I need to watch how I answer.
Yeah.
And it's never about age. It's actually about ability.
Completely.
I know 85-year-olds who are doing Ironman distance triathlon, and I know 30-year-olds who couldn't even think about doing that. And
completely. Yeah. And you could, not only is the point super evident that we grow more different from each other as we age in terms of physical capacity, you could be perfectly fit but not want to do that thing or not be an athlete. You hear people saying, I'm too old for that. For some, physical activity. Well, perhaps they are indeed not strong enough. Perhaps they are not coordinated enough. Perhaps they're too smart for that. Perhaps they don't want to try hang gliding in the stiff wind next to a giant cliff. So there are a bunch of reasons why you might want to do something or not do something, but it's almost never, ever, ever about age. It's about attitude, experience, capacity, and so on.
I love that. Okay. So I think there are so many places, and what we may have uncovered is that for many of us, it starts in our own minds. But where else do we see ageism? I mean, and maybe you're going to answer with where don't we? But I mean, in hiring and firing and retiring, and where else? Where do we see it?
Well, it is everywhere. I just want to go back to seeing it in ourselves for a minute, because the idea of ageism and age bias is a new idea to most of us, and almost all bias is unconscious unless you really enjoy being prejudiced and discriminatory. And most of us don't want to admit that we are biased, even though we all are. So the first step, because we can't challenge bias unless we're aware of it, is to look for evidence of ways in which we are biased instead of for proof that we're not. And it's not, and that is hard. However, the minute you realize, what you said to me at the beginning, in the green room, gee, I'm realizing that I'm more ageist than I thought I was. Only then can we realize that it opens almost like it's like letting a genie out of a bottle. Once you see it in yourself, it frees you up to see it in the culture around you. That's what consciousness raising did, right? For women, they came together and compared notes and realized that the experiences they were having of not getting hired, getting harassed, and so on, weren't because they had married the wrong guy or their boss was a creep or their tits were too big or too small or whatever. These were widely shared experiences that we could come together and do something about, because they were the effect of forces larger than ourselves, right? It's exactly the same. It's different, but it's parallel around age. Once you start to see age bias, you hear it on the radio. Don't get me started on NPR is one of the worst offenders. No one there would be caught dead saying an ageist or racist thing, but they diss old people all the time without even realizing that it is not okay. It is bigotry. Ever drive past a billboard? Have you ever seen an older person, except maybe I'm going to get myself in trouble, but maybe an older lawyer selling, casualty, insurance or something. Fashion magazines. Yes. Now there is the occasional really old, really chic older women. There's a certain fetishization of older women once you're ancient, but, ordinary middle-aged people, not so much. And even commercials, the Hollywood, the whole, the workplace is another huge arena where older people, and it starts at 40. It starts even younger if you work in tech. It starts even younger if you are a woman. It's even worse, of course, if you are a woman of color, if you have a disability, right? All those other identities make it even harder to get seen and heard in the world as an older person. So there is nowhere ageism is not, but there's nowhere, there's nowhere where we don't have the skills to see it and to do something about it either.
Ironically, somebody the other day had me as a guest on her podcast, and she said, "Did you know menopause is trending?" And I kind of stared back at her blankly, like, I don't even know what to say to that. And, I said, well, okay, good. But, ironically, a lot of marketers are targeting women in menopause right now. And yet, just full disclosure to all of our listeners. So I create, images for use in social media, for use in our marketing and on our website. And often I use a place called Canva, where many people go to create graphics. But when I put in words like active midlife woman, there, like you said, there is nothing. Like it is probably, very gray haired, very elderly. She may be carrying a cane, in fact, or it's like someone who has young children. And there's not much in between.
An older woman, you get a ton of white-haired white women against pastel backgrounds. You get no diversity at all. I think it's overall, it's a good thing that menopause is way more talked about than it used to be, because the reason it wasn't was, of course, because of its association with infertility and aging. And with these fears are not without basis. Around the world, health, medical research, interest in women's health peters out after menopause. We stop being, considered as research subjects and stuff because we are no longer reproductively useful. And that is, needless to say, maddening and wrong. However, if you look at what is driving all this messaging, or for that matter, the medicalization of aging, the message that wrinkles are the end of the world, that hormone changes are medical problems. And I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying that there are not physical changes associated with aging that don't deserve medical treatment, but we don't make money off satisfaction. And it is the pathologizing and problematizing of, wrinkles, I would say, are a natural, something that happens with aging. If you don't treat them, nothing bad will happen to you, right? And, menopause for millennia, women have gone through menopause and come out the other end okay. Again, I'm not saying that people don't have symptoms that shouldn't be remediated, but there is now a massive industry selling, dividing, these transitions into all these stages that are symptomatized, problematized, and in which you are told you need to buy these things, do these supplements, do these exercises in order to get through it okay. And the reason is because they are profitable. And aging is not a problem or a disease to be fixed or cured. It is a natural, powerful, inevitable process that is part of being human, and it's a journey we are all on. It is not a problem.
To give an analogy, so with nutrition, often it's said that we all have to make about 200 decisions every day about food. I mean, what we're going to eat, how much, when, who with, blah, blah, blah. By comparison, if I asked you to predict how many times a day on average do you think any of us bumps into ageism, is there an answer to that?
Well, I wouldn't begin to come up with an answer because it's so individual. If you think of, if you are a kid, you bump into ageism all day long because you don't get to eat ice cream all day, and you don't get to run across the street, and you don't get to stay playing with your friend, and you have to go to bed at 8. And you could argue, if you were being a strict constructionist, that all those deprive me of my autonomy as a child. Childhood is different, but I will say that once you are, that we need to have rules for kids so that they can grow up safe and healthy. But I will say also that there is no such thing as age appropriate once we are out of childhood. And that every time that's such a general question, but when the world is full of now young women, speaking of toxic beauty culture, getting plumping and fillers and collagen stuff to prevent wrinkles. That is just nuts. Every time someone says a off the cuff comment that disparages growing older, that is bad for us. It's bad for us individually as the person who says it and as the person who thinks it. The effects of ageist attitudes towards aging on how our minds and bodies function is a huge area in itself. Ageism makes people more liable, more likely to get to suffer from dementia, and it protects us against Alzheimer's. If you have a accurate and positive attitude towards aging, you're less likely to get Alzheimer's, even if you have the gene that predisposes you to the disease. And that's just one finding. So every time, whether at any age, we automatically blame a problem on how old we happen to be. We automatically say, whether it's an ache or pain, every time we stay home, because we might be the oldest person at a gathering and we don't want to stick out just because we're old. Every time we are afraid to get on a bicycle or go on explore some like weirdo part of town or whatever, because we are trepidatious because of our age or what we think is our age. It just cramps our horizons, our view. Every time we're reluctant to go across the room and talk to someone who's significantly older or younger than us. Every time a young person sits down at a table full of old people and goes, I'm with all these old people, or vice versa, because it always works in both directions. There is nowhere where judgments about age are not present. Ditto for gender, ditto for race. It is hard to break the habit of associating with people who are not like us in any of those ways. But the rewards are enormous, and the alternative means that we live in, an ageist, racist, silo where we're not exposed to people who aren't like us. And that makes life infinitely richer. And it just doesn't make sense to go through life dreading our futures. And as we age, I think you'll find this is true, especially as women, when we look back and think, geez, I can't believe how much of my youth I squandered on worrying about getting older. And when I find, in fact, that being the age I am is a source of enormous power and confidence.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Yep. I think that's so very true. Okay. So you alluded to maybe a first step being, I have to acknowledge it. The fact that it's probably there, that I am more ageist than I think I am or was, and now I'm conscious about it. What else? So breaking those habits, you indicated, is hard, but what would be some steps to do it?
Well, I think the breaking the habit of making a beeline for people our age when we enter the room is a really good habit. Or if you sit down at a dinner table or something like that, go sit with someone who is not, the person who is the farthest apart from you in age. They may be boring as can be. You may indeed have nothing in common, but it's not going to be the age difference that makes you like them or not like them. Even if you are not listening to the same songs that they are, you can talk about what kind of music you like. You can talk about what movies you like. You can talk about what president you like, right? There's a lot more to life than trendy pop culture references. People say, we won't have anything in common. Well, are you human? Did you wake up in the morning? Do you eat food? Do you like sex? I mean, there's a lot to talk about. A lot more to being human than the things we associate with age silos,
Yeah, great answer. All right. When somebody wants to eat better, there's this whole continuum, and another analogy here coming. There is on the spectrum of not paying any attention to reading labels or what's going in your mouth. And then we can actually take that so far that, we've come up with a whole new list of people who are just like, oh my gosh, they won't eat anything without knowing exactly what's in it and where it was made and what kind of soil it was grown from. And they're extremely opposite. With ageism, can we go too far the other way?
You mean think about it in too great a detail?
Yeah.
No, because however each of us thinks about it is going to be constrained by our own personality and choices and privilege. In order to spend hours a day reading labels and choosing what kind of, food the animals that you eat consume, or whether you eat animals at all, that takes a lot of time. And that takes access to organic food. And it takes access to consultants and specialists who can, test your hormones and your body, and who can consult you can consult with. If you are very poor or very busy, you don't have the time to do that stuff. Maybe you're wealthy enough to consult someone who can do it for you, right? So those things take up as much time as our privilege allows, and are also shaped by our interest and our health. More and more people I know are realizing they are lactose intolerant, they are gluten intolerant, or that if they cut out, certain foods, they won't experience certain physical symptoms. So I think it's our circumstances and our interests and our luck and our privilege that shape which set of questions about what we eat or how we think about I don't even want to say how we think about age, because age is so integral to who we are, but how we think about how we are in the world, whether we think of ourselves in terms of, of being a woman, of being pretty, of being ugly, of being fat, of being smart, all those things age informs. There's nothing to which age, doesn't play a part, but their salience depends on, it could vary from year to year. It could depend on whether you're, on vacation or in the trenches with a project at work. So it's such a fluctuating field. You may not be aware of your age in one situation and walk into another room and go, holy crap, I'm the youngest person here. I'm the oldest. I'm the, smallest, least famous, most famous. We are constantly balancing all those factors with, all kinds of decisions. That's a very woolly answer though, but it's a very woolly subject.
Truth. Thank you for that. And I want to make sure that we get this included. So the title of your book, again, I read in your bio, but This Chair Rocks, a Manifesto Against Ageism. Your book title rocks, by the way. See what I did there? Would you just describe it for listeners? Because we're going to put the link in the show notes, and I want to make sure that as many people get their hands on it as possible. But do you want to do a little tease?
Oh, geez. Well, I will say that it is fun to read. And I will say that if you are an audiobook listener, I did read it myself, and people say that I am an engaging reader. And it, I think people think if it's a manifesto, there's going to be a lot of fiber, and there is a lot of fiber, but, it sounds like me, and it really starts out explaining how I fell into this, and then how I came. I mean, I can guarantee, here's my tease, guarantee that you will feel infinitely better about the years ahead if you read this book, because you will come away with a sense of the forces that profit when aging is framed as a disease, when wrinkles are framed as a disaster. There's a scholar, Amos Wilson, who said, if you want to understand any problem in America, don't look at who suffers from it, look at who profits from it. Right? So when you start to see all prejudice, racism, sexism, ableism operate to divide us, right? They pit us against each other, old versus young, black against white, fat against thin, you name it. And they prevent us from joining forces to challenge the status quo. So when you realize, back to consciousness raising, there are these huge forces at work that, and I have been brainwashed by messages since birth about how horrible it's going to be to get older. Of course they become part of your personality. You didn't do anything wrong. But there is enormous liberation in seeing those messages and sort of coming out of your foxhole and starting to look around and go, oh crap, this is everywhere. It's not a failing of mine. And the truth, which is not that the scary stuff isn't real, but that our fears are so out of proportion to reality, and that we can learn to think differently. Thinking differently is free, right? You don't have to go to school. You can just read my book. You don't want to read my book? Read my blog. It's free, and I will plug also, let me finish the thought, which is that once you start to see it, it becomes manifest in the world around you, becomes something you see from history and your own life and your own thinking that we can think differently about, and you feel better and you feel empowered and you stop dreading your future mindlessly. And I don't mean mindlessly as an insult. I mean mindlessly because we don't stop to think about it until we make a deliberate choice to do so. And my book will do that. And I just want to mention a site called the Old School Anti-Ageism Clearinghouse, oldschool.info, which contains hundreds of free, vetted anti-ageism resources, toolkits, graphics, videos, animations. Everything is free except the books, I should say. And so that's sort of your one-stop shopping to educate yourself at whatever level and to whatever degree is comfortable for you.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much. And we have listeners, all of the links are in the show notes, and you want to capture them all. Ashton, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
Listeners, okay, now it's up to you. You can leave me a show note question or comment, and you're going to want to come and check out all of the links to reach Ashton. You're going to want to get your hands on that book, and I would love to hear your thoughts when you do so we can go through it together. You'll find the show notes at flipping50.com/Ageism Dismantled. What are you waiting for? Let's start flipping 50 today.